So the rules go. Now, international accounting standards never would have been caught out by that at all, because international accounting standards always used economic substance rather than legal form. So the only way you were getting away with equity accounting in special purpose vehicles was making sure that you didn't have the majority of shares, less than 50%. And that's because US GAAP used to choose consolidation or equity accounting on the bright line criteria. These days, remember, they don't. They now look at control. So IAS had always done this. So what they would do, IAS would say, look, is the special purpose entity set up for the benefit of the sponsoring company? Does the sponsoring company have decision-making power over the special purpose vehicle? Does the sponsoring company have the ability to absorb any residual rewards? Okay, residual rewards after the liabilities have been paid off, anything else belongs to the equity holders. That's the residual rewards. Or do they have the risks? Essentially, if the special purpose vehicle can't pay its debt, would they have to pay, for example? And does the sponsor have the residual interest? Well, that's just really the same as the absorbing the rewards. So what they're saying is, look, if you have these things, you have the risk, you have the reward, you have control, in which case, don't care about the share ownership, it's a subsidiary, you must consolidate. So that's what IFRS said. US GAAP, remember, did not. However, US GAAP changed post-Enron as they realised that maybe economic substance was more important than legal form. Post-Enron, we introduced a classification now as VIEs. Well, actually, post-Enron, we actually had two classifications. Post-Enron, what they did was they now said, when you've got a special purpose entity, SPE, it can now be classified as a VIE, which is a variable interest entity, or a qualifying special purpose entity, which we can still get away with equity accounting. Okay, now just be aware with these qualifying special purpose entities, they've recently been removed, but only in 2008. In order to have a qualifying special purpose entity, it needed to be independent, i.e. make its own decisions, rather than the sponsoring company making its decisions. The qualifying entity had to have complete control of the asset transferred to it. So, in other words, the sponsor could have no control of the asset. It were only allowed for financial assets, i.e. securitization. And then finally, the sponsoring company had to be bankruptcy, believe it or not, remote. Not easy to write with these pens. Okay, so the sponsoring company had to be bankruptcy remote, meaning essentially if the qualifying special purpose entity went down, couldn't afford to finance its asset-backed securities, then it wasn't the sponsor's problem, i.e. you could not cross-guarantee. Now with the financial crisis in 2008, it became very apparent, or 2007, 2008, it became very apparent that qualifying special purpose entities were being used, even though the sponsoring was not, the company was not bankruptcy remote, that they did still retain some control and some risk. As a result, US GAAP said, right, that's it, get rid of qualifying special purpose entities. So these babies no longer exist post-2008. It's actually post-December 2008. You're that excited by it? Good. So now we only have VIEs under US GAAP. So let's talk about VIEs. What is a VIE? VIE essentially is any investment that you have where it has insufficient at-risk investment capital. So what they would tend to do, you can see less than 10% equity capital. They look at stockholders' equity as a percentage of total assets. And if it's less than 10%, they argue that this special purpose vehicle has not got enough equity to absorb future losses. In other words, it would require support, essentially, somehow. Okay, so that's the insufficient at-risk investment, very thinly capitalised, that's all it's saying. Second bullet point is just saying the shareholder doesn't, main shareholders, majority shareholders, don't have decision-making rights. The main shareholders do not have any requirement to absorb expected losses. The main shareholders do not get any upside with residual returns. In other words, it doesn't look like the majority shareholders, doesn't look like they have any control. Doesn't look like they've got any risk or reward. And if they've got no control, no risk or reward, it doesn't look like it's their subsidiary. Let's go and find out who it is. And of course, it's probably the sponsoring company. Whoever has the risk and reward, it's your variable interest entity, you must consolidate. So once we find out who does have the risk and reward, they will have to consolidate. So let's imagine a securitization special purpose vehicle. Essentially what it's done is it's issued asset-backed securities and used the cash to purchase accounts receivable from the sponsor. Well, essentially, if we believe that the sponsor has all of the risk and reward, we'll say this special purpose vehicle belongs to you, it's your subsidiary, consolidate it. So the accounts receivable will be added back to the sponsoring company's balance sheet, and the debt issued by the special purpose vehicle will appear as a liability in the sponsoring company's balance sheet. Okay, which means your leverage ratios increase, receivables increase, receivable turnover decreases, return on assets decrease. Okay. So let's have a look at some examples of variable interest entities. Why are they called variable interest entities? Well, a VIE, of course, is called a variable interest entity because you are controlling the entity somehow, even though you don't have the majority of equity. The classic one is the debt guarantee. So in other words, you guarantee to pay off the asset-backed securities if the special purpose vehicle fails. Well, of course, you've got all of the downside risk now. And if you've got all of the downside risk, it's your subsidiary consolidated. Subordinated debt instruments. So rather than financing the special purpose vehicle by holding its equity to avoid the majority stake, you've financed it using subordinated debt. But subordinated debt ranks behind all other creditors on a liquidation, so you've still got downside risk if the special purpose vehicle was to go into liquidation. So you've still got the penalty of absorbing losses. Lease residual value guarantee is just when you sold an asset to a special purpose vehicle and then leased it back. Well, if you then guarantee the residual value of that leased asset, it will produce a loss for the guarantor if the market value declines, essentially. So again, you've got the risk of the leased asset declining in value. Participation rights are a classic. It just allows the holder of the participation rights to withdraw earnings using some other mechanism than dividends. And typically this will be management agreements between the two companies, management rights. So essentially you'll just be able to withdraw your management fee from your special purpose vehicle. Asset purchase options, again, if the holder gives the holder the benefits of any increases in the fair value of the asset held in the special purpose vehicle, so you've got the upside. So again, you've got the benefit of holding the special purpose vehicle, so it would be your subsidiary. So the idea is the variable interest entity holder absorbs the losses, receives the returns of the special purpose vehicle. In that scenario, it's your subsidiary. You consolidate regardless of your share ownership. Oh, thank goodness we're at the end of this reading. What a whopper. Okay, last little slide to talk about. Just an overview. Certainly know about the classification and treatment of your marketable securities. Held to maturity, available for sale and trading. Know the differences. Know as well equity accounting, acquisition accounting and proportional accounting. And know, of course, really importantly, how they affect your ratios. Also be aware of those differences between US GAAP and international accounting standards. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of the first